Are you a U.S. taxpayer? If so, you just helped pay for a speech by white nationalist Richard Spencer. Spencer is best known for his goal of a post-America white ethno-state and describes race as something between a breed and a species. Believe it or not, he has spent most of 2017 on a national tour giving lectures at public universities. So additional security has cost schools big, as much as $600,000. So, since these are public universities, American taxpayers are partially funding a national speaking tour by a white supremacist. What? Yeah. Wow. Why? The easy answer is because of free speech, and freedom of speech is good. What was that famous quote again? I disagree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. But what if I don't just disagree with what you say? What if I think what you're saying is so hateful, so over the top, ridiculously wrong, that even having the discussion infringes on my rights? To answer that, we need to talk about free speech in America. So it's time to play Know Your Free Speech Rights, the game show where you decide if the right to free speech is being violated. Round 1. An engineer for a prominent software company circulated a memo railing against the company's diversity initiatives. It went viral and people got super offended. He got fired. Was that allowed? Yes, it was. Private companies are not the government. While our tech bro certainly had the right to say he hates diversity without fear of arrest or censorship by the government, he was not protected from all the possible social consequences of his speech, including getting fired. Round 2. Some teens in St. Paul, Minnesota burned a cross on the front lawn of a black family. They were charged under a St. Paul ordinance which prohibits the display of a symbol which, quote-unquote, arouses anger, alarm, or resentment in others on the basis of race, color, creed, religion, or gender. Was that A, totally allowed because or B, not allowed because racism is speech, I guess? Believe it or not, it's not allowed. The Supreme Court sided with the cross burners. The city of St. Paul, aka the government, was technically censoring the teens' right to express their views by prosecuting them for expressing an anti-black viewpoint. To put it mildly, the teenagers could have been charged with trespassing or vandalism or any number of ways that they broke the law, but not for expressing a racist point of view. Round 3. A North Carolina accountant who was apparently not a fan of President Obama was overheard saying at a Waffle House, "Obama and his wife are never going to make it to the White House. He needs to be taken out, and I can do it in a heartbeat." Was our waffle enthusiast A, creepy but just waving his free speech flag, or B, creepy and totally illegal? He was indeed creepy and illegal. He could have said all sorts of nasty things about the president-elect if he hadn't been making what is called an imminent threat. Threats or words that are likely to incite violence are not protected speech. So, how'd you do? Clearly, speech is a little tricky. We talked to Lee Rowland, a senior staff attorney at the American Civil Liberties Union, to find out more.
The United States is notable for having some of the most protective laws surrounding free speech in the world. That's because of the First Amendment, which protects the right of the people to speak without government interference. And that has led to court cases interpreting that First Amendment to protect basically all speech, including hateful, vile, racist speech, unless and until that speech becomes a threat. And what a threat is a really high bar.
So as long as you're not making real threats, the government isn't going to touch you. And this is actually pretty unique. In the rest of the world, hate speech is not as protected as it is in the US. And most Americans are passionate about this absolute freedom of speech. A 2017 Rasmussen poll found that 85% of Americans agree that people's right to free speech is more important than making sure no one is offended by what people say. And as we saw with our crossburners, the courts are also willing to protect all speech, no matter how unpopular it is. However, the courts are counting on society to weed out the bad ideas through something called the marketplace of ideas. Just like at the store, where people can choose what to buy and what to leave, people can choose to buy into ideas or ignore them. Theoretically, the best ideas will get promoted and the worst will die out. So, how's that going?
Because you could have a marketplace of idea, and not the best idea wins out, but maybe the one that someone who with the most charisma talks about, or the person who's most seductive, or the most eloquent.
So if we're going to participate in the marketplace of ideas, it's good to remind ourselves to be better consumers. And when we're seeing speech, we should be skeptical just as we are when we're buying products.
But when does an idea hit the bargain bin? And who decides? Universities are often drivers of change, and public universities are grappling with this question. When should they limit speech on their campuses?
This is a very difficult concept for a lot of people, to think there's some speech that should not be permitted in the university. Some ideas do not merit debate. They are kind of obsolete, and we've put them to rest. The concept of slavery in this country was put to rest. What's problematic about ideas that shouldn't be debated anymore? Some students would suddenly feel forced to defend their own humanity. It's an absurd requirement to prove your own humanity.
So, while you might have the legal right to say whatever wanders into your brainscape, some people are now saying when we allow free speech, which includes hateful speech, we actually shut down the marketplace of ideas. What do we lose when minority voices are silenced by the need to defend their humanity? And what do we gain by defending totally free speech?
While I certainly would never expect or require any person to engage in a debate that fundamentally questioned their humanity or their right to exist, I don't think we can say that that conversation can't be had, right? That it should be off the table.
People agree that limiting the conversation is a bad call. A 2016 Gallup poll showed that 72% of college students oppose restrictions on expressing offensive political views.
So what universities have to do is they have to balance the interests of the university, which are education and research, with the need to accommodate as much speech as possible. I want to stress that in any school or university, many ideas are not permitted. They're not included. You don't get an invitation. If you just believe in astrology, you're not going to be invited to the astronomy department. If you're an expert on the planet Vulcan, you will not get invited.
So, in some circles, ideas about the value of and the place for totally free speech are evolving. Even if it's legally protected, is there speech that people are no longer willing to pay for or willing to die to defend? You decide. But also, live long and prosper.